Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ryan Ride Mechanic channel. How the heck are you doing today? Okay, a couple days ago, the Joker over there at Six Flags Great Adventure had a bit of a hiccup on the lift hill. I'm sure you guys remember the pictures. A lot of you probably seen my video on it. I got some new information today, and I wanted to share it. Not too much. It's nothing really groundbreaking, but it's kind of a wrap up to the situation, which is always cool to have where it's like, all right, so what happened next? So let's get into that.
Now get ready. Here we go.
If this is your first time here, make sure you like and subscribe. Do all that stuff downstairs. Share and comment, all that, because it really does help me out, and I do appreciate it. Okay, let's jump right into this video. Okay, so today I got an email, and they wish to remain anonymous, which is perfectly fine. I honor those wishes anytime somebody contacts me with information, because people do with sensitive information all the time. So I wanted to read the email, and then we can talk about it from there. Says, hey Ryan, just wanted to send these pictures your way. I got to the park shortly after opening at 1 p.m. and this was the view. Within a minute or two after the train at the top was released from the lift and completed the circuit back to the station, shortly after maintenance went over to the remaining car with the JLG and were inspecting the top part of it. I left the area, but the other car was gone within an hour and back into the station. It looked like there might have been a crane nearby along with the JLG. I'm guessing they must have manually lifted the first car all the way to the top, then normally used the lift motor for the second car. Definitely had the car at the top chained down, too, since it was definitely past the point where gravity would have taken over. There were tons of maintenance staff in and around the ride. Okay, so let's look at the first picture. Both these pictures are very similar, so we'll look at each one. Okay, so they said two things, that they had the JLG out there in a crane. For those who don't know, which could be a lot of people, those who don't know, JLG is a man basket. It is a manufacturer's name of a man basket, so it's kind of like a Chevrolet or a Honda or something like that. JLG is the manufacturer of the man basket. So basically, they had people up there needing a high reach man basket to get up and work on, look at, and inspect these things. They also had a crane off to the side. So realistically, what happened was the night before, when the two trains, when they put two trains on the lift somehow, they would have called the crane company up that night and said, hey, first thing in the morning, they'd have to pay an emergency like overtime fee, or maybe even it was late that night, but they said, we need a crane out here as soon as possible. They would have had to give them pick distances. They said, okay, the way cranes are measured out is that you need to measure the center pin where the center of the crane sits and put it further out away from the ride. So the center pin would have to sit here, which means, let's see, you're going to need to put the boom out there. Most crane operators call it stick. So like in order to get a crane up there, the ride's, let's say, 140 feet tall. So it's like you're going to need 165 feet of stick. The coach weighs, I'm not sure what these coaches weigh, just a guesstimation. I'm probably going to say that coach probably weighs about 4 tons. Maybe. Probably a little lighter than that, actually. But 3 to 4 tons. And the center pin can sit within 50 feet of the ride, maybe. So that's where it's going to need. In fact, let's look at this real quick. The Joker is right here. Okay, so here is the lift hill right here. Here is Harley Quinn Crazy Train. Problems stay close to each other in that park, it looks like. Alright, so they've got a nice pathway right around here towards the back. This kind of looks like a maintenance area back off over there. Hard to tell without being there. A lot of stuff from the aerial view looks clogged up, but basically they would have had to drive the crane in from the back right here. Parks like this, it's really not a big deal. They get cranes and stuff in there all the time. So they would have just gone down a roadway somewhere and gotten down to the Joker area. And realistically, I would have put the crane right here at the base. I mean, it's within a 50-foot swing radius. Probably actually a little tight to put a crane inside there. Could have also put it back in this area over here, depending on how stable this ground is. I'm not sure what this stuff is exactly or how much elevation change there is, but looks doable. So anyways, yeah, I would have put the crane right here, and then that would have gotten easy access to the top of the ride. So yeah, we would have reached down, would have put the crane up, and would have grabbed both coaches, or would have grabbed the top coach and pulled it up right around here to the top of that crown. And then there's only so far you can pull that. Once you get a crane with a load attached to it and it starts getting up, the coach will start to go over, but the crane will keep wanting to pull up. And if you don't do things in straight lines, you really risk damaging the crane of all things, and crane companies don't want that. So they really don't want to lift things at odd angles that especially have the potential to move somewhere. So I'm guessing they would have gotten the crane up, the coach up right around this curve right here, and then it would have been up to the crew to basically get chain pulls and stuff and start to pull that coach forward the other way. And then once it gets up close to that crown, you need 2 sets of chain pulls, actually 3, because you use 2 to pull it up that crown, and then once it gets towards the top, you put a 3rd one on the back, and then you need 2 people, 1 to pull and 1 to let chain out at the same time. And then the one that's in the back is kind of loose until the coach goes and starts to roll forwards, clunk, and then that back one pulls tight. And then it's like, okay, at that point, you take one of the 2 of the front off, put the second one on the back, so now you have 2 in the back holding it direction of travel. And then you have one person in the front loosening that chain up a little bit as you let the coach forward. Why wouldn't you take both off in the front? Because most of the time by this point, I'm paranoid. So I'm like, I don't want it to accidentally go backwards for some reason. So until I advance it like another foot or so forward, I don't want to let that one in the front go. Then once I'm certain the gravity and the track have control of it and it's crowning over there, then I'll take the one off the front and we can just let it go for that. Once it passes that crown, however, nobody in the entire ride area, maintenance regardless, nobody crosses the ride path. So you got to treat it as a hot track from there on forward. And then at this point, what these guys probably did, can't really see it in these pictures. What I would have done is I would have gone from here and I would have taken a sling, which is basically it's a nylon circle, would have taken a sling and choked it around the coach to the track. I would have taken something like a sling or a rope, typically a sling because it's rated for that weight, and choked it around there and then loosened the come-alongs up to where they're pretty much not touching anymore. That way it's only supported by that sling. And then we'll move on from there in a little while. They said they pushed this one over right when this person got there. It says it was in this position, and right when they got there, it went forward. Now, this could have actually been the picture that he took right here, which is, it's just kind of funny if it is. See, you have this coach sitting here, and you have these 2 guys right here doing something with a long pole. This is where that nylon sling comes back into play, because I have one sling. I've taken the come-alongs off of it, and I said, okay, there's no metal holding it anymore. It's down to this nylon sling. We have a 10,000-pound nylon sling rated holding that thing, and it's holding the weight just fine. They say, well, this is one thing nobody ever thinks about, which is, how do you let that coach go? Well, there's not really a good way to do it that's safe, because a lot of people would say, well, you get up there with a shackle and you could take the shackle off. Well, a lot of that stuff acts like a giant rubber band when it's under that much tension. So when it finally does come apart, it like bing, comes apart in a really nasty way. You don't want to be around when that happens. So why I put a sling on it in my mind anyway is because I want to be able to put a sling on it, and then I'm going to do something kind of like they're doing. I'm going to get a long pole or something, kind of like you would use to cut a branch down off of a tree, and I'm going to go up there and literally cut the sling with that pole until it starts tearing itself apart, and I cut it, and then it finally just breaks, and that coach goes full free with nothing attached to it. You cut right where the sling was choked around there, or was saddled around the coach. You just cut the sling right there. That way it completely 100% lets go of that coach, and you have that coach moving freely on its way, and you have the sling attached to the track, which you just go up there real quick off the ladder, it looks like, climb up there real and just undo the rest of the sling parts and take it down. For what you're doing, the parks go through slings all the time. They're expensive, but they're not super expensive. In this type of deal, this is a sacrificial component probably that they're using to release the thing over there. And I think that's what they did in order to move this thing over. The next step was this guy. This is the one that was midway down the lift hill. They had to get to this and say, hey, once the crane grabbed the first one and pulled it up, they got to this one and said, okay, what's going on with this? What's happening with this? Our guide wheels, our road wheels, is everything intact? Because now you have two questionable vehicles where you're like, I'm not sure what the condition is of these. The light in the morning time really helped them out there, able to get up there and really survey anything and address any damage that might have happened. Looks like everything's okay with it. The theory about my theory I had on the other video about them taking the bumpers off, more than likely the bumpers were pushing on each other, and then once it started to go up that track, the bumpers simply, because of that chordal effect, went like this. The first bumper went down, and then the two just went past each other. So that made more sense. I edited a comment on that first video because I'm like, it makes more sense if the bumpers just slid right by each other. And in this video, in this picture, you can actually kind of see, if I zoom in a little bit further, too far, right here, that is the front bumper for that vehicle. So it's there, it looks like it's intact, it's fine, it's everything. So it's like, okay, there's your vehicle bumper right there, no problem. Top side, we can't really see if there's a bumper on that one at all up there. Yeah, you can't see because that bumper is obstructed by the track in this picture. So this is where we would have used the man lift to get up there and say, okay, this coach looks to be fine. Everything looks all right. They've probably already had the ride motor engaged and it lifting that coach up just a little bit. They probably wanted to check and move it and see if it was okay to move. So they probably, in a manual mode again, they probably bumped the lift motor to move it up a little bit and say, okay, everything sounds fine. The chain trough isn't mangled up or anything like that. So they're like, all right, that looks fine, because that coach is in a different position than it was the night before. If you remember from the first one, the top of this coach right here was actually, the top of that coach right there was actually down right about here in that picture from the night before. Let's look at the second picture now. All right, here's a second picture that was sent to me. What can we tell about this? Well, right off the bat, we can tell that there's restrooms nearby, but there's no signage pointing exactly where the restrooms are. So immediately as a guest, I'm confused. Are we supposed to pee on the pole, or what's going on here? I don't know. Maybe maybe this is the restroom. Maybe it's a dog restroom. No, it has pictures of people. I'm not sure why it'd be a restroom right there. I don't see any toilets around. But there's a fire hydrant for dogs, I guess. It's like a pet relief area. That's pretty slick, right? Arrows are like cheap. They're really cheap. Just have the sign department make some arrows so you can like restroom and then point somewhere. I don't know who needs to hear that in this video, but there you go. All right, let's zoom in. Let's find out what's going on here. All right, so this is the same picture, different angles. Again, this guy said he came up right as they were pretty much releasing this. And there's a different angle. It's kind of the same exact thing. You can't really see much what's going on. There's the two guys up there, right there. You can't really see much that's happening with that top vehicle, but you can't really see much down here in the bottom. What I was curious to see, I'm like, did they lift that bottom coach up, or did they move it with the ride? So what I was looking for was the pusher, and like where the pusher was, remember the pusher is 180 degrees off from each other. So where the pusher was the night before, I was speculating it was right here the night before. But now the vehicle was also right here, and now it's up there. So I'm looking for that movement same way there. And if we zoom in, what can we see? Well, it looks like right there. Yep, that's it right there. The pusher's right there. So it's moved. It's gone down. So that means they have used the ride to move that vehicle up from there. So once they separated the two, and again, you could see the front bumper right there. There's the front bumper on the coach. It's intact again. I've read a lot of your comments and everything on this. It's like, again, don't know why they decided to do this, but the common theory is that they somehow pushed both vehicles out into manual mode, like used vehicle B to push vehicle A out, and then used the ride to lift vehicle B, which just so happened to be behind A, and pushed it along. One of the things that could have happened is they could have manually manipulated the coaches into this odd spot for some reason, and then they could have used the emergency evacuation motor that's up on top. It runs off of a trap key system where you have to pull the keys out and put them in to operate the lift hill. But they could have used that to actually push the thing up and out. And one of the bad things about emergency modes is that there's like no safeties in them whatsoever. So if they accidentally turned that motor on and they didn't understand that, they would have seen those coaches go out and they would have been like, okay, and e-stop it. Just to realize that the e-stops don't work because that emergency system is 100% separate from the ride control system. The e-stops have no function on it whatsoever. This was the trap key system that I'm talking about. You basically have to remove key A and insert it into slot A down here, and then you remove key B, and they go into two alternate panels outside on the ride, and they both have to be installed, and I think turned? I'm not sure. It depends on the key trap system, but they both have to be installed in the two separate panels out there to basically agree to turn the lift motor on and move it. But again, it's not the ride's lift motor, it's the emergency function. So there's like no safeties on it whatsoever. So when you give parks the power to do things like this, it's like nobody but maintenance ever uses it. And it's definitely one of those things that if you have to operate it with people on it, it's like you better have every T crossed and I dotted it, because If something goes wrong, it would be bad. But these are rare circumstance these type of functions are used. Okay, so that's it for the video. It was just a quick wrap up. I got those pictures and a little bit of that story, and I'm like, okay. So they picked up the one and kicked it over, and then they sent the other one over under its own power. So basically they just turned the ride back on and sent that lower coach up and over, and it was all good from there. And I'm not sure the ride opened up that day. It's probably down for the rest of that day. Not sure if it'll open up this weekend, maybe. Who's to say there? But that all depends on what actually happened to cause the event and the repercussions of landing those two coaches on there. What's their arsenal of vehicles right now? Do they have the other 4 coaches sitting ready to go? Are they like, okay, so we could still open the ride up with 4 coaches this weekend coming up? Or were 2 other coaches in rehab and the ride might now be down to just 2 coaches? You know, because a lot of these rides, they came with 5, 6 vehicles, but 2 are a lot of times constantly in rotation. Okay, if you haven't done so already, like, subscribe, do all that stuff downstairs. It does help me out. I do appreciate that. Comment, great. If you want to email me, my email is ryantheridemechanic@yahoo.com. You could send me videos and pictures and stuff like that. The size is very limited on that stuff, so if you have a big video that you wanted to share, just email me and let me know. That way we can make alternate arrangements because the email won't handle it. And stay off the air gates.